Hey everyone, welcome back to Voices of Kung Fu, a podcast dedicated to exploring the stories, traditions, and lived experiences behind the world of martial arts. If you would like to support and continue hearing the voices of the people behind these arts, you can do so at buymeacoffee.com/voice of Kung Fu. This podcast is produced by the ICGPMA, International Chaogar Praying Mantis Association, and hosted by myself, Sifu Nishan, and my co-host, Sifu Alex, practitioners of Chaogar Southern Praying Mantis and other arts. This episode was originally recorded during the COVID period and has now been re-edited and remastered for a wider release. We are joined by Sifu James to explore his path shaped by decades of dedication, deep internal practice, and a journey that took him all the way to Hong Kong in search of authentic training. This is a discussion shaped by experience, where concepts like structure, intent, and known mind aren't just ideas, but something earned through years of dedicated practice. Real training, real people, real voices. This is Voices of Kung Fu. Let's get into it.
Hey, welcome, everyone. Thank you again for joining the live talk discussion with myself and Alex. Today, we have Sifu James. He's the head of the Xingyi Da Cheng Boxing Association and has been involved in practicing martial arts for most of his life. Big thing for us today is to talk about Yi Quan. In 2005, Sifu James relocated to Hong Kong to be close to the source. And for the next 11 years, he lived, breathed, and trained the arts as a student with some of the world's greatest living masters. This was a really important period in his life in which he developed high skills, both a martial artist and a human being. By the time he left, he was both a teacher and an indoor disciple in Yi Quan, Xing Yiquan, Liu He Bafa, and Yang style Tai Chi. We're really, really pleased to have Sifu James join us today, really just to learn more about him and learn more about Yi Quan as a style. So, Sifu James, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome. So, our first question: tell us about you. Tell us how you got into martial arts. Even if you started from a kid, I mean, what got you on this journey, and where are you now?
Yeah. So like everybody, I dabbled when I was really young, kind of like 8, 9 years old, judo, bit of taekwondo and stuff like that. And I remember it quite vividly, actually. I had one of those judo gradings when I was about 9. I think it was like for a yellow stripe or something like that. It was a full day kind of affair. And in between, because you obviously had to like have judo when you're younger, have fights to earn grades and stuff. So in between, it was probably pretty not that good of the teacher to have done this, but he put on a Bruce Lee movie for the kids to watch. So there would have been, well, it would have had the nunchaku scenes kind of edited out and stuff. Remember those old rank kind of VHS?
Yeah.
So I mean, 18 movies showing it to a bunch of 9-year-olds probably wouldn't happen these days.
Right.
But anyway, so that happened, and I was kind of like mesmerized and thought, well, I want to be doing that. I don't really want to be doing this. But at that time, I was brought up living in the northeast of England. Very few kung fu teachers around, and very few that probably would have entertained talking to an 8 or 9-year-old. So I continued dabbling in bits and pieces until I got to the age of about 12, 13, and then started to learn Wing Chun. So Wing Chun was my first real, I would say, when I kind of got serious with my training, my first Chinese style of kung fu anyway. And I had a very good teacher who was based up here. He'd originally learned from Alan Lam, who was a Hong Kong trained Sifu, and then Sam Kwok as well, so from the Ip Chung lineage. And that was Trevor, and Trevor is quite a well-known teacher who's been around since the 70s, and he taught me very traditionally, so slowly, sort of like, 2 years on the first form, Siu Lim Tao, practicing standing on one leg, super traditional, but really, gave me that great foundation of training. So I continued as that as a teenager. And then...
Your first introduction to Kung Fu?
Yeah.
Cool.
All through my teenage years, up until I was about 18. And then...
Oh, that's a long time.
Yeah. yeah. And I didn't finish the form at that time either. I don't mean I didn't finish the full system. So we trained that slowly and traditionally, and then I left the Northeast to go to university down south to study sports science, and the aim was that I was going to teach, even though I hadn't finished the system, but teach up to what I knew and continue and come back on holidays and stuff and continue to train with my teacher and still learn. But then I got to university and it's evident straight away there was already a Wing Chun club in the university.
You say that because even when I went to uni in 1995 or 1996.
I was 94, so it would be about the same time.
Yeah, so one of the main kung fu styles, in fact, was the only one there was Wing Chun. There was a club specifically for that. It was interesting, yeah.
Yeah. So I went along and thought, well, I'll train with those guys, and that's when you get your first kind of foray into Chinese politics, which I had no idea of, and realized quite quickly that I wasn't very welcome. And I really just went in there and would have been happy to have trained and, you know, even to have relearned things in a different way and stuff like that. But I wasn't very welcome. So I kind of thought, well, I love training. I'm not really that bothered about teaching anyway. I just want to continue what I'm doing. So I went off and did other things, and there wasn't really any other Chinese styles around apart from Wing Chun. So along with my studies, I started to do some Muay Thai, Silat, Filipino stuff. I became quite interested in the Southeast Asian martial arts, kind of from the practicality perspective of it and just the fluidity of it. And I could see some of the synergies with Wing Chun and stuff like that. So I did that for a few years. And I did my dissertation on psychology of martial artists, actually, which was quite interesting. And then I went to work in London. So I lived in London for about 8 years. And during that period of time, I kind of began to explore more of the internal styles of Chinese martial arts. So I came back into the Chinese martial arts.
Where were you in London?
Originally, I was living in North London.
Oh, really?
So when you guys talk about that, yeah, just near Archway.
Oh, yeah.
N19, right?
N19,
yeah. Yeah. So so I was based up there, but I was working in the West End. Yeah, so and you know, London's a much more of a hotbed of Chinese martial arts. It is in Newcastle anyway.
Yeah. Around that time, Archway was, I think that's where they set up is that where the Shaolin,
Archway, yeah.
I didn't train there myself, but I think it was.
Station Road.
Yeah, I saw them practice in the park once. And so I started to do Tai Chi and some Bagua, really kind of got into the internal stuff, a little bit of Xingyi as well. And then after a few years of training, taking it quite seriously, I really made the decision that I wanted to go out to source and to live and train in Asia. And there was possibilities at that time where between Hong Kong and Singapore, and I was sort of looking at what was available to study and my work options and all that kind of stuff. And it ended up being Hong Kong. So I went out in early 2005. Before that, I'd had a very brief introduction to Yiquan with a teacher who's still teaching now, called Karel Koskuba, who's based in Reading. Very, very nice man, very good teacher. He's been around for a number of years. He teaches Chen style Tai Chi and Yiquan. So I had done a little bit with him just prior to coming out. And, you know, I was trying to speak to all of my contacts in London, say, look, where can I go in Hong Kong? Who can I train with? Got lots of different recommendations, people saying lots of different Sifu, lots of places. So kind of when I first went out to Hong Kong, I was like, right, I'm just going to try out everybody all across the internal styles, but see.
Did you have a particular style in mind? Or?
Well, the last couple of years are really the Xingyi, which, well, I guess we'll talk a bit more about the origins of each one later on. Is you know, each one comes from Xingyi, so it's kind of the mother art. That was where I felt kind of my place, or more comfortable, and the system suited me. I like the dynamics of it. I like the mechanics of it. I like the theories behind it. It's very practical. It's very no nonsense. But still had a lot of depth to it at the same time. But there's never a lot of Xingyi around. It's a very rare style. It's probably more in Taiwan, in Hong Kong. There's little as well. So kind of the two main things I started training in straight away was Yiquan and also another style called Baji. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Baji, which is the classification between internal and external can sometimes be a bit vague. I mean, as you know, you've got the three main internal styles of Tai Chi, Bagua, and Xingyi.
Yep.
And then a few other ones that can be included as well. And there's a few others that are borderline. And you know, it's a massive loaded conversation even on what you consider to be internal and external. And I've got my kind of viewpoint on that. So Baiji kind of, it sits in the middle. A lot of people will call it an internal system, but it's clearly got Shaolin origins and it's probably closer in its mechanics to Chen style Tai Chi actually. So I trained that in the park in Hong Kong with a very good teacher who was from the north of China, a huge guy, for quite a few years. But I suppose the most impactful to me or meaningful teaching experience that I had that kind of then dictated the rest of my, you know, martial arts life afterwards was meeting Sifu Chan Tachun, who teaches Yiquan in Chinwu. Have you been in the Chinwu Association in Hong Kong before?
Oh no, I know of it though. I know someone that used to train there. He come over from Germany to go there and train.
It's in an old building. I'm sure probably some people watching this have been there, in Jordan, in Kowloon, and you know, sort of by Fok Yun Gap originally. So it's kind of the whole essence of sharing Chinese martial arts to the world. So they teach different styles on different evenings. So they're not affiliated to any one particular system.
Yeah, that's right.
There's a kind of a foundation of forms and stuff like that they have as the original.
It was Chinwu like organisation, a family of different systems.
That's right. Yeah, and they had a curriculum together and
like
stuff as well.
an association.
That's right. It still exists. It's probably not as big as what it used to be.
Yeah.
But in Hong Kong, like everything, the lines are grey. So that association was there. But then they'd let other masters in and teach. And it was all very friendly. And you know, we'd start our class. There'd be another class leaving beforehand, and it was all very nice and friendly and quite a non-political environment, which is always good to see in Chinese martial arts.
Just out of interest, before kind of going to Hong Kong, had you ever been to Asia, or was like this the first time you were?
I had actually, yeah. So I had been to Hong Kong once on a short trip in the early 90s with my sister actually. So my sister lived out in Thailand. She was in Thailand working there on a contract for about 2 years. So I went out to see her and we visited Hong Kong. And I was doing some Muay Thai then as well. So I got to train Muay Thai. But when I had gone out to Hong Kong, it was only for a few days, and I didn't have any time to train. I did have a look around, and I saw Lung Ting's Wing Chun school actually, and I kind of had a peek through the window. But I didn't go inside. So that was my exposure to it. So not
So
this
was a big decision to.
It was a big decision. It was the whole life.
Live there and train.
I secured the job before I went out, so that was kind of like the easy part. And you remember at this time, I was reasonably young. I was in my 20s. You know, I didn't have a property or anything like that. I had a girlfriend, and she followed later and stuff like that. But it was going to be now or never. I was at that point in my life where if I'd left it a couple more years, it definitely wouldn't have happened. And I knew that, but it was still a brave decision to kind of, you know, quit your job and pack your stuff up.
And the driving force of that was, I want to learn Kung Fu.
100%.
I want to learn Kung Fu.
That's not what I said in the job interview.
Of course not.
Why are you here?
Why do you want to work for a company? Because I want to learn Kung Fu. That probably wouldn't have gone down well.
That's something I love. You were training. You were like, you know what? I want to go out to Asia. I want to go to Hong Kong. I want to be close to the source. I want to go and live there and train. That's my motivation. Train.
Yeah, and I had no idea how long that would be for. I mean, I had a game plan of training, and that could have been a couple of years. You know, I didn't think things out that far on how it would go, and you know what would happen with that, how long it would be there. And it's interesting because when I came back to the UK, kind of 11, 12 years later, one of the first questions people always ask is, why did you come back? And I say, well, when I left, it wasn't like goodbye. I'm never going to see you again. It was like, well, I'm going over. I'm relocating. I'm going over to train, but it doesn't mean I'm never coming back. You know, I could have been back a year later and thought, well, that didn't work out very well. You know, but it just so happens it was 11 years, and there wasn't a game plan, and it was, you know, I ended up meeting my wife out there and having kids and stuff like that. So it made sense from a family perspective and,
Sure.
and things to come back. But yeah, it was a very loose plan when I arrived there. Yeah, it was.
And
I don't think I'd be brave enough to do it now. I don't think my wife and kids would appreciate it if I did it now.
Of course not.
Mhm.
And just out of interest, what was there anything needed in terms of an introduction, a letter of recommendation, or
Kung Fu? Not really. No. All I got was a list of names, a list of kind of email addresses of a few people you can try and tap up and talk to. So we're talking. This is the beginning of this late 2004, beginning of 2005. So we had the internet, but it wasn't as sophisticated as it kind of is now, 15 years later. So most of the and the same way Hong Kong kind of Kung Fu society is now, most of the good people wouldn't have websites or anything like that. So it becomes harder to, you might see the odd video and posted of someone doing a form or something like that, but you wouldn't necessarily be able to trace it back to the website and where they came from, unless they had a commercial school. But I had done enough training by that point to know what I didn't want. I didn't want to go into a commercial school. Everybody was wearing a Kung Fu outfit and jump around flashing weapons, and as soon as I saw too many white people in that, I'd be out of there. That is not what I wanted, and I knew that straight away. So the quality in seeking that out and finding that, and that was really about my first couple of years there. And I was lucky that I found Sifu Chan early on, and you know, I'm still my Sifu now, and our relationship continues. But I did a lot of seeking out other people during the first couple of years, trying different styles, teachers of different styles, seeing whether it suited me, seeing what their style was like. You know, I always have my own parameters to check that out, and that is, you know, how approachable and friendly the place is, along with the quality of Kung Fu. But the main one is the quality of the students. Walk into a place, even if there's only 3 or 4 people training, and talk to the students, not necessarily the teacher, how long have they been training, and then what their level and quality is like. And sometimes, you know, just because you're in Asia, just because you're in Hong Kong, doesn't necessarily mean you're guaranteed access to really good food. There's a lot of crap around everywhere. So, you know, you can go into a place and then find people who've been training for 10 years and they don't have anything. The teacher might do. Now, for me, there could be a couple of reasons for that. It could be because they're not a very good teacher and they don't want to shout, or the student's not very talented, or, you know, just they haven't picked it up.
Farmer's not really into it.
Yeah,
You know.
multitude of different reasons behind it. Multitude.
No, did you know what the kind of essence of Yi Quan was, and what the system entailed?
I had an idea. So as I mentioned, I did a little bit of training, not a great deal, but I touched on it for a few months before I came out, and obviously, you know, each one is one of the internal styles. Every style is famous for one thing or one technique. Each one is famous for Zhan Zhuang, for standing exercises. And that's a funny thing that goes with each one, because, you know, you find this in a lot of other styles as well. Some people claim to be each one teachers because they do some Zhan Zhuang, or they think they know each one because they know Zhan Zhuang. And that's like saying, I think I know how to throw a jab, so I'm a boxer. But, you know, that might not be the case, and it probably isn't the case, right? It takes years and years and years of perfection to have a, you know, jab of the caliber of someone like Ali or whatever. And so I had an idea, but I was in no way experienced, skilled. My skill
No, but it's kind of like
very low at that point.
You knew what you were kind of going to look for.
Knew what I was going to look for, but I was surprised what I found. I was very surprised what I found, because when I found my Sifu, I kind of had always thought of this Zhan Zhuang as being almost like a ancillary exercise that was designed to kind of relax your muscles and, you know, kind of put you into a tranquil sort of, and then you can learn the exercises afterwards. And that was very wrong. So, you know, one thing, you know, talked about before this started, Nishan, you and I, was about the engine in different arts. Southern styles having one particular engine, and Bat Mei, Long Ying, and Chao Gao maybe sharing similarities with those engines.
Yeah.
So Zhan Zhuang is really, it's the engine in the core of each one, but it's also how you train within that. So you don't just stand there on the spot and relax. You do a lot of the literal translation of each one is mind boxing. So effectively what it is about training your central nervous system. And you do that through various different ways, through imagery, through testing of 6 directions of force, up, down, left, right, backwards, forwards, through various different postures.
Yeah, so it's not just the Zhan
Build that
Zhuang.
in.
It's not just the Zhan Zhuang, but there's actual different postures as well.
There's various different postures that have different reasons behind why you're
Yes.
doing them. But my Sifu describes Zhan Zhuang, it's like putting money in the bank. It's an investment in your time.
Yeah,
So if in a lot of styles, you might have one core form. I don't know what it is in Manchester, but in Wing Chun, it'd be like Siulim Tao. So if you do Siulim Tao over and over and over and over again, that would be like you say your bank savings account kind of thing.
Yeah.
Foundational work, which you can never do too much of. It's what you should always go back to all the time and continue doing. The more advanced you are, you go back to it, and it looks different every time you go back to it. You spend more and more time doing it. So Zhan Zhuang has it has a lot of depth to it, because effectively being the engine of the style. So the engine is about how you build power and how you release power. There's in every style, right? It's about being able to hit people hard. So, and you have different mechanics and different ways to do that. So we train that through the Zhan Zhuang, through storing energy and releasing energy, and building the body, building the inside, the fascia, the tendons, the ligaments, unifying in the mind. So I talk about the central nervous system, unifying the mind with the body, to be able to produce force. And that's a process that takes a long time to achieve. But it's what I found with each one, it's a very scientific process. So it's nothing mystical or anything like that. It's it's nothing weird and talking about empty force and all that kind of stuff. It's very practical the way I learn. It's very pragmatic and functional at the same time.
Yeah. So do you find that at each stage, whatever you're learning, when you kind of ready for the next stage, it actually builds on that?
Kind of does. It presents itself. Yeah, it does. You have these little epiphanies where you suddenly realize something that you weren't getting before. I had a major one after my first year of training each one, and I've talked about this before with some of my students, and I had a really bad stinking cold, and I wasn't going to go to training that night. Nose running, eyes watering. I felt really, really groggy. And
COVID.
Maybe SARS probably back then. So I ended up, typical thing. I'll go and sweat it out. I'll kind of go and train. So, and there was, we do a lot of different movements, and one thing we do because there's different types of each one, different styles of each one, or sub styles of it as well. Like every martial art, it branches out. The founder taught various different people, and those masters, then had their own take on it and developed it. So I'll talk a little bit later on about ours and how I do it. But so we have a collection of 12 techniques called Sap Yi Tong Sao, and they're not particularly complicated. But what is complicated about it is sometimes the contradiction that it's called mind boxing, but a lot of it is switching your mind off. That if you focus too much, it's a bit like the old thing on retracting a hand to hit, rather than using the front hand and thinking about the force coming here. I'm thinking about the force coming with my other hand back and switching this hand off. Okay, so that would be an example of using your mind boxing. And by doing that, you're turning your body, your shoulder, everything into it.
And relaxing the lead arm.
Exactly. So your lead hand staying in a relaxed state. So you're almost thinking of elbowing back here, but then you're producing a very relaxed, heavy power.
Yeah.
That's it. And that's part of the power of each one, that it's an expansive release. It's kind of, if you think about the on one level of power that some styles do, or not even styles, but maybe a low level representation of a style is probably a better way to put it, is some people think of grabbing the muscles. Okay, so when they hit, they think, I'm going to put everything into the last inch and bang, like that, kind of fact. So in each one we release. So we don't contract muscles, but we contract in our mind, and then we release. So everything's very fluid, and it'll just go through and have this kind of dense, heavy power to it if you do it correctly, and then paired with the correct body mechanics and stepping and moving at the same time and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so I was doing this, making a hash of this thing for months and making slow progress with it. And of course, I turned up with this stinking cold and got to the point we all started the lesson with an hour of Zhan Zhuang. 40 minutes to an hour of Zhan Zhuang through various different positions. And my teacher's very traditional, so it would be very low. You know, in Jingmo, well, they put in air conditioning a couple of years ago, but at that time, you know, in the summer, it was pretty nasty. It was grim.
Yeah.
You know, small room,
Humid.
kind of old aircon going. You know, 20 people standing there sweating, doing these postures, and it's tough. It's tough because you start to feel all the tension across your body. You start to fatigue on the shoulders, the legs start shaking, and all that kind of stuff. And I could just feel myself getting sicker and sicker while I was doing it, and thinking, why did I come? Why did I come? Why did I come? And the sweat was pouring off me. And then we started practicing this what I had been struggling with, one of the Sap Yu Tang Sao techniques. And I realized that at that point I didn't care anymore. I was just like, you know, I feel so crappy right now, I really don't care. And then bang it came.
Yeah.
It's always when you stop looking for it,
You
trying
let
to
go.
get it. And my Sifu kind of walked past me because he's got this kind of real attention to detail on you know, millimeter precision on every single technique. Hyper critical. That, you know, to the point where sometimes training with him can be quite stressful because you're like, I can never do it right. And he's like, no, this. Keep doing it. And they just looked at me and he just went, good. And I just thought,
Whoa.
I'm ready to collapse here. I feel absolutely dreadful. I can barely stand up because I didn't care. So I'm doing the technique. Everything was just relaxed. And that was a real key moment to realize that part of the mind boxing thing of each one, the intention, is switching it off. Is being able to know. So it's a contradiction. In some ways, it should be called no mind boxing. So the harder you try and get something, the more you try and do it, you fail, and it's that's integral to the system because, as I mentioned before, the system came from Xingyi, but Xingyi and Yiquan have one big difference. Xingyi uses intention as well, but for example, if you're talking about puncturing like a straight punch and hitting, Xingyi is famous for this one punch and, you know, being able to plow through people. And they use that visualization that if I'm going to hit a person, I'll hit through them, I'll hit the wall behind him.
Yep.
Each one is really the description of what an internal martial art should be. Internal being about the individual, the practitioner, not the opponent. So in each one, there is no opponent. There's nothing to hit through. So all you're doing is just occupying space. So you're only concerned with where your limbs are in in motion, your own individual proprioception, and the own criteria for what you have in your technique, not what your opponent's doing at all. So you don't look to plow through your opponent. You look to take space. So the opponent isn't there at all.
Yeah.
Which is quite a difficult concept at first to get your head around.
Yeah.
But then when you are able to grasp that and you build up the foundations from the training, from the Zhan Zhuang, and from the footwork that goes into that as well, and then you realize that it's actually something that very high level boxers do as well. They focus on everything they're doing, not necessarily what the opponent's doing. The minute you fixate on your opponent, well, you can't possibly catch up to that.
No, because every opponent's going to be different as well.
Absolutely.
So what you're saying is because the focus is on you, if you're developing how to step, how to land, how to use the waist, you're looking at maximizing your power to the best it can be. Then it doesn't matter about the opponent because
it doesn't matter.
You're going to use that technique anyway.
Absolutely. And there's people probably thinking, well, hold on, that sounds really good in theory, but what happens if someone's going to hit you back? So where do you get? That's why we have this. So, and that is one of the things that I didn't realize before I learned each one was I considered this to be a power producing exercise. This is a god. So the first thing they teach you in each one is to raise your arms. So we actually enter into movement by bringing our arms up into this condition here. And then we do 45-degree footwork and we move off angles. So each one is training time in the beginning is all about standing, but the concept of the art is about moving, hit, move, hit, move, hit, move, hit, move.
Right.
You're never still when you actually start to practice the art. So you do all this standing with a view to be able to move very, very quickly with an active guard and with no opponent.
Right.
And that kind of summarizes a lot of what the style is. It's a bit deeper than that, but on a very basic level.
That's actually a really good explanation because myself and I'm sure quite a few others, the knowledge of each one ends at Zhan Zhuang. Yeah, and that's as far as I got in my.
Well, people have it's a bit sad because they've perhaps never had the chance to go into the art as well, and they consider that the art is Zhan Zhuang. Zhan Zhuang is a very integral part of each one, but it's much more than that. And Zhan Zhuang is it's a means to an end. It's not. It's not the end. And it's interesting because I found that in a lot of different styles and practices, they've taken the Zhan Zhuang and put it into other stuff. So each one is almost been a kind of a second dish to a lot of other arts. You see a lot of Tai Chi guys might do a bit of each one on the side, Xing Yi, and I'll teach Xing Yi, Bagua, and a little bit of each one as well. But it really is its own art and deserves kind of more airtime than that. There's a lot of depth to it.
Yeah, I've heard it described as mind intent boxing.
Yeah.
And so the intent plays an integral role in what you do. So as you described, there's various postures, and you use various mind intent with
which are they're like triggers to what you're trying to do is develop these 6 directions of power, which I talked about. So for example, if we're talking about holding the ball, the first posture of each one here. So a lot of people mistake that and they think it's an outward power, like a Tai Chi Pong, an expansive outward power. But actually we're squeezing, we're contracting. Not contracting the muscles, but I call it like mind. So if you think about, there's a Swiss ball in front of here, and I'm squeezing that ball in my mind, but my muscles don't tense, but I'm holding it. Now what that does, it links up all my tendons across my shoulders, my back, the power there. And it also makes your muscles very loose and very, very relaxed. So they're open, so you can transmit power, you can transmit force, and you're able to create a very strong structure by aligning the joints and the skeleton and the bones, etc., by doing that. But you must have it absolutely precise. So for example, your elbows must be 45 degrees, every joint has to be turned, you need to sit into the kwa, you need to chom ging joy jiao, drop the shoulders, elbows, all that kind of stuff. There's many, many, many requirements to do it correctly.
Is the body structure design, is it seen as Taoist or Buddhist in its
it's probably a bit eclectic between the two, really. Right. Standing postures have traditionally been more in Buddhism, moving postures have been more Taoist in the past, but they all cross over between.
They did, there was massive they kind of shared a lot of knowledge and stuff. It's just
they did
maybe the question's wrong.
No, it's a good question. It's a good origins is always interesting. So the problem when you get into history of Chinese martial arts is to try and get in between the fables and the people flying around and over roofs with swords and things like that, and having thousands and thousands of battles and never being undefeated, and then but then what really happened? It's difficult in Chinese martial arts. The good thing about each one is it's a relatively young art. So it was only conceived 100 years ago.
Oh, really?
Right.
Yeah, so the founder, Wang Zhanghai, he only died in the 60s. I think it was 1963 when he passed away.
Oh, wow. But it's got its roots. It's got its roots in an much older system with a lot of history.
Xing Yi.
So he had learned Xing Yi from a very famous master called Gao Yunshen. So he was somewhat of a kind of child prodigy. And Gao Yunshen is the famous for having the one-step bong chuan. It's the guy who got imprisoned for killing somebody and then he got shackled.
And just
again, it's one of those stories.
Ball and just
have that image in your head, don't you, that he was kind of wearing the arrows on the suit and stuff like that. And he was just practicing there all day. Bang, one step. I mean, even if he had a small cell, he could have done other techniques. But anyway, he only did that one. It's a great story. I'm sure he had a really good bong chuan, and I'm sure he did go to prison. But I don't know whether he did it for 25 hours a day while he was in prison or not. That's another thing. But he's a very famous master, and he wasn't around for that long ago. So we know he historically did exist and everything else. And so it's not an old art from Chinese martial arts terms. It's 100 years old. So Wang Zhanghai, and this is interesting when you get into history and things being exaggerated. And it's one of the things that attracted me to each one is that he learned it. Well, he developed the style after learning Xing Yi.
Right.
What he did, he got his Xing Yi up to, he was apparently famous for that and very, very good at Xing Yi. He decided to then go and travel and test his art. So he traveled across China and challenged various different people. He got as far south as Fujian. And it's famous. I don't know whether you guys have ever heard the story, but he famously got defeated 2.5 times. One was by a White Crane master, which was in Fujian. One was by a Lokhop Bafa, Luhe Bafa master, Wu Yihoi, who was in Shanghai. And the other one was by a dwarf, which is why I said 2.5 times, which is not a very nice thing to say, actually. He said he got beaten 3 times, and one of them was by a small guy, but he said it's 2.5 times. So, but I found that really interesting because he talked about his losses in terms of the system. So it's a bit like the modern. I've got a bit of a boxing background as well, and I love boxing. And you know, boxing people talk about investing in loss. So
Yes.
you learn from the losses that you have, not from the 21 victories against lower level opponents.
Yeah.
Finding really good people and learning. That's what a really good boxer is, right? But you don't hear that very often in Chinese martial arts. It's normally about had 100 battles and defeated everybody and all this kind of stuff. But he didn't talk about that. He talked about the people that he lost to, and then he didn't combine those elements into his style, but he respected those individuals so much, and it gave him a different idea to develop each one, or the concept of each one. So you had the Yi in Xing Yi, which is the mind, which is the intent part. The Xing is the shape part, which involves the 5 elements and animals and stuff like that. So he really kind of focused down on the mind aspect within the art, and then was very, very combative with that. So in a period when he was teaching in Shanghai, he published quite a few newspaper articles there, which I don't think they were intended to be open challenges, but they were more kind of, he was very against people practicing forms, almost like a kind of Bruce Lee of his time, saying, you should be focusing on skill, you should be trying to build kung fu, not trying to learn 100 different forms and do 100 different things. So there's no forms in each one. So he had that concept back then, and he got challenged a lot, and he attracted a very strong group of senior students who mostly had come from other styles and other systems, who went to train with him. So my Sigong, my grandfather, was Han Xingyun, who emigrated to Hong Kong. So he had learned Xingyi Bagua and Sigar Chinese wrestling from his father. So he was a very high level practitioner when he met the founder of Yiquan, Wang Zhanghai, and he challenged him, and he got knocked out. So then he studied with him, and that was apparently, according to my teacher, the school at that time, in that period of time, was pretty brutal. People would come and they would have lots of challenge matches, and it would be kind of, show us what you got, and it was very fast, and it was all about the martial side of it. So it was very aggressive. So Master Han studied with him for quite a number of years, and then eventually made his way down to Hong Kong. And he also has an older brother as well, Han Xing-Q, who went to Zhuhai. So he emigrated down to the south as well. And both of them started teaching there. And that's where my Sifu got introduced to him in the early 70s. I think it was 1972. Studied with him until he passed away in the mid 80s.
So just so I've got it in my mind, because this is the first time I'm learning about this. So you have the founder of Yiquan. He came from Xing.
He came from Xingyi. Yeah, he was a high-level Xingyi practitioner, but young.
High-level Xingyi practitioner. Traveled around China, testing himself out, and
getting into trouble,
causing a little bit of drama.
Yeah.
Having some scraps, and then
he got beaten up.
Got beaten up, and then he was set up shop in Shanghai. And was publishing articles based on his experiences, based on his learning, saying, be focusing.
He was quite critical.
Basic, but setting up shop and saying, you got to be practical. You shouldn't be trying to just gain forms. Whatever you're doing should be combative. And at that time, he had developed this,
which was very new then.
I didn't realize it was young in comparison to
that.
Each one now, in terms of from him, doesn't have form.
It doesn't have forms, no. It has some of the foundation of Xingyi within it. So Xingyi does have some short forms. So depending on each one style that you do, so sub-styles have developed. And like with a lot of founders of styles, it changed over the years as well. Right. So when my grand teacher learned in Shanghai, it still had quite a heavy Xingyi influence on it as well. So he still practiced the 5 elements and all that kind of stuff when it. Evidently, as he got older, then he moved around. So he lived in Tianjin for a while, and he ended up in Beijing, and then back to Tianjin. He taught, up until, as I said, he passed away in the 1960s. So my grand teacher learned in the 1930s. So it was a 30-year development, and they weren't together. So each one, probably the most prolific style that you'll see in the world now, comes from Beijing, which is quite different to each one that I practice, and that is more from the sort of the later life of Wang Zhanghai.
Yeah, they've had influences as well as he.
He would have had influences, and also the students that he learned. and it's good. It's still, but it's very, very different to
Interesting.
what we do. Also, the mechanics are slightly different. I mean, I've spent some time with teachers of those styles of Yiquan. So I did a lot of research as well for Yiquan. So I went up to Beijing, and met a number of the first gen who've passed away now, sadly. And this is 10, 15 years ago, the first generation students of Wang Shanghai.
Wow.
Who were alive then. Unfortunately, they're not now. There's one left, and that's very sad.
Very sad, yeah.
But I was lucky that I went up there and I got introductions, and I met his daughter as well, who had been a practitioner for most of her life, and she was really special. She unfortunately had been very badly injured during the revolution. The Red Guards had raided the home of all the kind of antiques and anything of worth in there, and she had her leg smashed by a rifle butt. So she had a really bad injury, but she still practiced Yiquan and was really good. And she was lovely to me. And I met a few other ones from who learn, and also so the Yao system is probably the most famous one that's out in the world now. There's two brothers, the Yao brothers, who learned from their father, who was named as the successor of Yiquan from Wang Shanghai. So they have their not style of Yiquan, but their I call it version because it's different to what we do, and the postures are a little bit different, the movements are a bit different. I spent some time with them as well, not a long time, but enough to know they were very powerful and very good, but different, a little bit different to the way that we practice it.
Was it partly due to maybe people coming, as you said in the early days, that had already studied something else, whether it's singing or whatever? There's a question here that ties in with this, actually. Is Arthur, or Artorius Eva, he just says, is there a big barrier to entry for Yiquan? Because he'd imagine just to understand postures is super tough for beginners and boring.
That's a good question. You've definitely got to have a lot of patience. So my story kind of continues a little bit because Sifu Chan Tai Chun is my first Yiquan teacher, and he's still my Yiquan teacher, and I still spend time, still talk to him, and we'll see him next time I go to Hong Kong and stuff. But I learned from another Yiquan teacher as well, almost by accident. So each one is connected to another art called Le Ba Fa, which we talked about before, one Cantonese Lok Hop Ba Fa. And one of the 2.5 losses that Wang Shanghai had was to the founder of Le Ba Fa. I say the founder because the history is a little bit more clouded. So the prominent master who's well known for Le Ba Fa. And they became very, very good friends afterwards. And they taught together in Shanghai, and Master Wang sent his students to learn Le Ba Fa from him as well, which I think is something pretty special. And it's kind of that mentality doesn't exist that much these days.
Do you know? Do you know the English Le Ba Fa?
Do I know
the English translation of that?
It is Method 6 Harmonies.
Yes, I had.
Or water boxing. Sometimes they call it water boxing.
I was going to say, I've heard it described as water boxing, but I just picked up about the 8 methods.
The reason why it's called water boxing is the level changes, the height of the system. So in a lot of internal styles, you'll see about staying the same level, but they use the power of the hip, the qua, to come up and down a lot, so it looks like water going up and down. But anyway, I'd read about all of this, and after about 5 years of training with Sifu Chan, I was quite intrigued about Le Ba Fa, which is even more rare. Talking about niche arts, like this is about as niche as it gets. Like very, very few practitioners, never mind teachers of Le Ba Fa in the world, and there was a couple in Hong Kong. So I was quite keen to see what connection there was to the art. Why Wang Shanghai had sent his own top students to learn this other system as well. So I was intrigued by it. So it took me a while, but eventually I found a teacher called Hoi Kit Wa, who was based in Qingyi in Hong Kong, and he had learned it in China. So I went to meet him and found him to be very, very powerful and kind of what I was looking for and really interesting. And then I found out he was also a teacher of Yiquan. So he didn't just do Le Ba Fa, he did Yiquan as well. And I said, well, where's your Yiquan come from? So from Han Xing Q, which is my uncle. So it's like, that is Han Xing and my grandfather, his brother.
So the older version.
2 brothers, the older brother. You got Han Jr. who went to Hong Kong, then you had Han Senior who went to Zhuhai. So Sifu Hoi had gone over to Zhuhai and learned from him. But they were very, very different, these 2 brothers. So there was an age difference between them, and also physical difference between them. So the older Han was taller and slimmer. Apparently, the systems and what they did were just different. They didn't practice the style the same, which is really interesting.
They both did the older
divided.
version. They both did the older version of each one.
It did, yeah. They both learned at the same time from Master Wang. Yeah. And then they went different directions. So to get to my point in the question, because I'm being really long-winded here, and I apologize.
Cool. No, it's really interesting.
Yeah. So when I first learned from Sifu Chan, it was painstaking. So it was, 40 minutes to an hour of standing, legs trembling, shoulders shaking, all that kind of stuff. And then eventually stick with it. Maybe 7 out of 10 people will quit. Then 3 will stay. And then maybe of that 3, maybe 1 or 2 will kind of get it. And eventually they'll work out how to relax your body and all that kind of stuff. And that was the traditional way of learning. When I met Sifu Hui, I realized that the older brother, Han Xing Q, had a different method for teaching. And one of the first things that Sifu Hui said to me was, he said, because we obviously got into the subject of each one. I said, well, I've been doing that for 5 years as well. And he said, show me what you've got. Show me your Zhan Zhuang in a position. And he said, my Sifu would say that you're not qualified to do that. And I said, I'm not qualified to do that. Your body condition is too stiff. You're not showing the 6 directions. Your structure is not correct. So you shouldn't be practicing it. You shouldn't practice something if you can't do it correctly. So they had a very, very different view. Rather than practice it more and more and more, and eventually it'll come to actually, unless you can do this thing right, especially when you're talking about mind boxing and your CNS and using your brain and your spinal cord and all that kind of stuff to get the right kind of feeling. If you start doing it wrong, you're going to build the wrong kind of habits in your body, or it's going to take a lot longer. So he had a different method of teaching, which was quicker, but meant really, really focusing on to the individual condition and the muscle condition of the body, the structure, but holding it for a far shorter period of time until you lost that quality of feeling, and then stopping at that point there. And he would also say, you don't practice unless you feel good. So you relax first, then practice. You don't practice to relax. You get the right condition into your body first, and then you practice. A bit like if you were going to have any kind of physical activity or a fight or sparring or anything like that, you would warm your body first, prepare, get into the condition, and then you would do it. So he's saying it's the same thing with Zhan Zhuang. If you feel, waking up in the morning, you're feeling stiff as a board, if you go into that position there, you're just going to get stiffer and stiffer and be stiff as a board. So you say, the method would be to do little and often, kind of goose in the groove type of training activity. So rather than doing an hour every day, you'd be doing 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes at lunchtime, really focus. Because there's a lot of concentration. It's a real quite taxing on your mind and your brain, your concentration, your CNS, all that kind of thing, to get all those conditions and thinking about, even every individual finger, the joint needs to be curved, my elbow needs to be sloped down, I need to be thinking about an outward direction, inward direction, forwards, backwards, sinking, all these different things in your mind you're thinking, which isn't relaxing while you're trying to do it. And then to do that over a long period of time, it's pretty much impossible. So you need to be able to do it in short bursts. So to answer that question, there's 2 ways. There's one way, which is to sweat, endure it, and see if it comes. And then the second way, which I think is probably a little bit smarter, to be able to do it in little bits and pieces and do it correctly, but over a period of time. When I began teaching a few years ago, I found that I had more success with the second way in students, but I still sometimes give them a nice dose of the old style as well. And I do both myself as well, but I actually think, and again, it goes back to my background in sports science as well. I always try to look for scientific principles to back everything up, adaptation, duration of time that will build something. But it makes sense, doesn't it? If you do something correctly, you're going to build a good habit. If you keep doing it wrong, is it going to correct itself? It's like the value of practicing 1,000 punches. Does that mean by punch 800, you're going to be punching well? If you've got a crap punch, you're going to be doing 1,000 crap punches, and then building that habit into your brain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like
most long-winded answer ever in the world. So no, it's not. There's no barrier. You can do it.
Yeah, it's like correct practice, but this is why we just say it's correct guidance.
Yeah, good teacher. You need to have the coach and the guide to show you, but then you also need to use your own brain as well. So we talk about gifted students. sometimes it's just having that little bit of gray matter, not education, but just to be able to work things out and suss it out. And that's, I mean, you guys will know, it's always the time that you spend outside the Kun that you progress. It's not when you go and you spend the time with the Sifu. It's when you're figuring it out by yourself, training by yourself, not with anybody else.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, why is it like that? And that's when you have the little epiphanies, right?
Yeah. Those little insights, those little epiphanies, those little something just clicks. Or the other way is that that nothing has changed, but then suddenly you do something and it's just suddenly feels differently, and you realize
Everything's changed.
your power level's gone up or something. You hit a point where something has changed and everything starts to feel different. And then you have to start relearning some stuff because you're doing it with a different.
Well, you go back to it, and it's like learning new stuff again, but you look at it with a completely different set of eyes. You're absolutely right. That's because you've reached that level where you can be more open to other things. But it doesn't happen gradually, as you said. It just suddenly happens. Yeah. Like that time I had the cold, it just it suddenly clicks, and then you're like you don't go backwards.
I've had it kind of described as, again, I've noticed through, one of the things that was pointed out to me was suddenly that there may be a period where you actually feel like you're not well, or you're weak, or you feel like you've got a cold.
Yeah.
And that's a transition period in a level. That's what happens. It might happen just before you jump up to a new level, and then you're operating at a different kind of level,
The highest level of each one is what we call Jianmu, which is called a health dance. Okay? And it's called a dance because you're moving around, occupying space. You're not thinking about hitting anyone, and it's a free flow shadow boxing type of movement. That's the highest level of each one, and that's when your brain just will completely switch off and just go into spontaneous movement, but keeping the same structure and everything that you've got there. Yeah. So these moments that we're talking about, I firmly believe they come from the mind and from the brain, and it's also about switching things off. The more you want something, the harder you try and get it, the damnedest it will be to get. It's like trying to grab sand in your hand and gripping it. It's just going to go all the way through. Yeah. And that's why I tell my students, just chill out, enjoy it, practice, have fun, and then you'll get the progress. If you take it too seriously and you're just trying, and I admire work ethic, and I've been like that when I was younger, and we all want it, like, I want to progress, I want to get better. But sometimes when you stop trying and just do the training, it'll take care of itself.
Yeah, and I think you hit a really important point there, is the practice outside of the Kun. It's taking what you learn from your Sifu, what you learn in class, and practicing, and also being able to practice other things. Because realistically, there's only a certain amount of modern day learning. There's only a certain amount of time that you have it in a class, whether it's 2 hours or a certain number of times a week. So a lot of those epiphanies, a lot of those questions, a lot of those trainings is going to come from your own self-practice.
Absolutely.
And I was saying this to one of my training partners was, listen, every time you have to practice, you practice daily practice, and whatever question comes up, whenever you go to the class, make sure you have a question for your Sifu. Have a question. Have do something. It doesn't matter. Have a question ready, because you've been practicing, and he's going to know where you are and understand what direction you need. And if you don't ask those questions, if you don't have questions, it's because you're not training. That's how
exactly. It's critical thinking. It's critical thinking, and it's really, really, really important. And a lot of people, and it's a sign of a good teacher when they encourage that as well. And it's nothing to do with being Chinese or Western or anything like that. I've had good teachers, I've had bad teachers. All the good teachers will encourage questions, critical thinking, and for you to challenge in a constructive, positive way. And that's when you make the art your own. Okay, you should not be the slave to the art. You have to make, and that doesn't mean you're changing it. That doesn't mean you're creating new techniques. No. It means you're synthesizing
it through your physical, through your practice.
100%.
Just train, just practice, just get it done.
It's a process. Trust the process.
Yeah,
but make the process your own.
It's always perfect when you're doing it. Sometimes it's a long journey, so you have to keep on practice again, and then suddenly it comes.
I mean, you guys will know when you see beginners, when you teach people, it's often the ones who struggle the most in the beginning who reach the higher level of skill, because they get those plateaus, and to get over them, they need to think.
Yes,
they can't grasp the coordination of it. They can't understand the engine. They're not getting it straight away. So they need to break it down. They need to make it their own. Otherwise, they can't overcome that hurdle. So having that hurdle in the first place is actually a good thing. It's a positive thing if you have that, because if you get someone who's very gifted straight away and they get that, they often get bored with it.
Well,
They don't take it along. They don't take it along.
I think they understand it already, but they don't. They've just
No, they don't.
the function, the movement, or whatever.
Yeah, they've got some genetic gift of physical coordination, and they might be athletic or whatever, so they can make the techniques look good, and they can coordinate the joints and the body. But there's a lot more depth to it than that, and that's when you have to make it your own. You have to be able to spend the time by yourself doing that.
So
If you're in the class and you're under the watchful eye of your Sifu or whatever, that you're training and you're doing what you've been instructed to do, you're practicing it, but it's not yet your own. It's when you go away and you kind of practice it and try it, and then feel that you've accomplished it, and then you feel that you own it, and then you need to still work on it and build.
Correct. And then the other stage of that is when you teach it to other people. Because that's when you reach another level as well, because you have to really understand it to be able to do that. Yeah. It's one thing being able to understand it yourself, but then be able to understand it to articulate to somebody else is another thing. And we've all been through that.
There's a lot of value.
How does this happen? And you go, oh.
Sometimes it's someone else's brain asking you a question from a completely different angle, and you're thinking, I never thought of it like that. Why? Yeah. What? And then I'm like, that's a really great question. That's a really Oh God. And I'm gonna go ask Sifu Paul. Let me think about it from my way, but let me ask, because that's actually a great question. But yeah,
I still call my Sifus up. We have WhatsApp video calls probably once every 2 weeks, and I'll ask them technical questions. I'll talk about my training, talk about what they're doing. And one of the things that I respect about those two is that they both train really hard every day. They're practitioners first and they're teachers second, which I'll always be as well. It's kind of like leading from the front. So when your teacher does that, and they're still on a journey themselves, they're still working on their own development, and these guys are both in their 60s. They've been training another 20 years on top of me. And to me that's really, so I still call my Sifus up. I still ask them questions. A lot of the time the answer, but it's one thing I said to Sifu Hoi just last week, actually, when I spoke. I said, honestly speaking, I've probably made more progress since I left Hong Kong than when I was at Hong Kong in terms of my own personal level, because I didn't have the Sifu there all the time after having the decade or whatever. I had to work it out more myself, and of course you can make the phone call and check things and all of that, but it was probably the right time for me to leave and step away and focus on my own practice for a few years and then teach. And obviously it's great to go back and have the trips, but I think that time when you make the art your own is when you start to understand it. And I'm nowhere near complete on that journey. I've got a long
perpetual students.
It's never ending, is it?
It's never ending.
You've got to have that white belt mentality of being able to continuously learn from everyone.
Like curiosity of just keep asking, keep wondering about things, being happy with something but not satisfied.
Yeah,
I think that's one of the.
I'm my own worst critic. I'm never happy with anything that even I will always look for faults.
Well, obviously, or that's great. But what else? How can it improve? It's like you gain, with the journey that people make. That quite often you can't see a change yourself. Other people notice it. It's like you think you're on a plateau and you're just not getting anywhere, but actually you're on a very slight incline. And when you look back, you've actually climbed.
You've come a long way, but it's a big mountain, isn't it? Yeah.
It never ends.
Yeah.
It's important to still keep that attitude and to keep that level of work ethic as well. And the great thing about each one, and I think this is with other Kung Fu systems as well, from what I know of other styles, is that the way systems have been put together, when you learn them properly, when you learn them through the correct lineage from knowledgeable masters, is how interlinked the systems are. And once you get an understanding of that, so you may, as you said before, Alex, that you may have an epiphany or a moment in one thing, then you go back to something else, but you realize it's actually linked. You could go and practice, one particular weapon for 6 months, but then you'd go back to doing something else afterwards, but you'd have a crossover effect on that other thing because you've been developing the same Kung Fu body and structure and mechanics and stuff like that. So when you're training properly, you start to get a real positive effect on everything that you do. You don't go backwards. As you said, you've always got that slight increment. But once you get on it, you've got momentum and there's some inertia there. It keeps moving. Other things start to, it feeds other things, and you get a crossover effect. And that's a good sign that you're training correctly.
Everything's continually informing everything.
Everything else, that's right.
And you go back to, as we said in the beginning, you keep going back to the foundation. And then the foundation becomes deeper and deeper and deeper.
Sambo Jin is our first form in the Jalga system, but it's also the master's form, if you like. Is everything, the whole system is in there. You don't know because you don't know enough. So
you only know what you know.
Exactly.
With each development, you know, whatever you do, if your power goes up, if your skill goes up, a bit of sharpness or a bit of, you know, understanding about intent when you're moving, it all informs Sambo Jin. It all goes back into it. That starts to develop, and then what you benefit from there feeds back into everything else that you do.
Definitely. And I bet there's things that you've learned in that form that your teacher couldn't have told you had to work out for yourself.
Yeah, you can only feel.
You had to unlock those keys yourself through your own training, through your own understanding.
Yeah, no one's going to teach you feeling and understanding how your body is connected and moves. Everyone's different.
If people start to describe the feeling, they're putting boundaries around what you're like, what you could experience.
Yeah.
Search for what
mismanaging your expectations as well. And as you said, it might be different.
Yeah. You search for what they told you. You might find it, but you haven't allowed yourself the freedom to just experience other things, because people have described things to me and I've just thought, oh, that's different. You know, it's not what I've experienced, but it's actually I have maybe later or whatever.
Yeah.
For me, it's about trying to feel the essence.
Yeah. But it's still about being you. We're not all trying to be carbon copies of our master, because that wouldn't work. They've had different experiences. They've got different body types, so many different personality, so many things that make up your kung fu. So you know, you have to have this flexibility. That doesn't mean you go off in your own direction and invent your own style and do this all the time. But it means you can express the system slightly differently, as the old masters do in every style. They're not copies of each other.
You bring up some great things as well, because like, for instance, like even with practice, like I remember from Sifu James and even from Sifu Paul saying with Sambo Jin, you should be able to express all the different types of punches in Sambo Jin. So generating different powers where it's up, down, in, things like that. And that was something I'd never really thought of until I was like, well, and you were saying, you always come back
to it.
A different power method of a particular punch or a slightly different technique, but then you've learned it, you practice it, and it needs to come back into your form. And that was when I was like, oh my God, I'm continually learning. I'm now trying to enhance my first form, my Sambo Jin.
That I learned years ago.
Yeah, that, which I thought I knew, but actually no, I didn't, because I've just done something as I've continued through the system. Wait, that needs to come back to that. That needs to be involved in that. What? Like, come on.
It's never ending. But the really interesting thing is that every system of Kung Fu has the same thing. So it doesn't matter whether they're a northern system, whether they're a southern system, internal, external. They all have that one either core form, or in each one it's Zhan Zhuang. You know, they all have that and they all go back to it. And you don't see that necessarily in other martial arts as much. But Chinese Kung Fu has that as its philosophy and its core. And we have massive variations between the systems and the styles and the engines and the body mechanics and the physical characteristics. But they all have this one core thing that we always go back to try and keep improving, go off, do other stuff, come back to that, spend more time doing it. And then probably as you age in the art and you get more experienced, you spend more time in that stuff as well. So it's full circle, right? But that's Kung Fu. Doesn't matter whether it's Tai Chi, whether it's Wing Chun, whether it's Mantis, Hung Gar, Choi Li Fut. It's that is Kung Fu.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, just for the listeners to really get an understanding of Yi Quan. So you have Yi Quan. It's relatively, it's not an old art, as you were saying. It's 100.
Yeah, it's got old foundations, but as an art on itself, it's relatively young. It's about 100 years old.
No forms, but you have postures. Now, how many
postures and movements.
So how many postures and movements, if you can kind of?
Yeah, well, it would depend on the Yiquan school and the subsystem. But yeah, typically within the hand system, there's 8 main zhongs or Zhan Zhuang, that go through various different positions out here and up here, and they're all to express energy in different ways.
Right.
So you build the foundation within the core of that stance, expressing the 6 directions of power, and then be able to move with that as well. So I may have this one here, right? This is the obvious one, is that's my guard there, and then I can move this way around and rotate, and then move quickly backwards, forwards, left, right with this, and hit at the same time. So that's also a hit. So it's similar to a lot of kung fu, is we defend and hit at the same time. But we do it through the Zhan Zhuang. So it's either and the mind boxing side to it as well, and the no opponent side. We're not like some other interpretation of other systems obsessed with trying to touch the opponent's arms. We're trying to occupy space and go through the body. Right. So we're not necessarily trying to get contact and do pushing hands and playing around and all that kind of stuff. Quite the opposite. We ignore that and just go through and take space. So you have the 8 main postures there. Within the hand system, we also do a lot of the Xingyi. So we do the 5 elements. Santi, which is the main stance of Xingyi, plays a large part in the system. I mentioned the Sap Yi Tong Sao. So they were 12 techniques specifically put together by Master Han, which some of them come from Xingyi, some of them from Yiquan, some of them come from Bagua, and they're all done with the same stepping pattern. So there's a lot of footwork exercise, a lot of footwork movement, because when you have this high risk strategy of no opponent, and I'm just going to go in and take space, unless you're moving around with a lot of footwork and very fast, quick footwork, you're going to be very, very vulnerable. So it's about taking angles and moving around and doing that. So we develop the body through the Zhan Zhuang, and then take that same structure, moving and very, very slowly at first. So, going on the old adage that, when you smooth, you'll be fast. Yeah. So iron out the kinks and everything else, all the little micro movements that you have there and all that kind of stuff. People think, oh, you're practicing slowly for health. And we're doing it to perfect the technique, because once you've then got that, then you can start to move quickly. But if you move quickly when you haven't smoothed everything out and you don't have the structure, you don't have the core right, it's just going to be, bag of rubbish. So the footwork and the speed work is, so there's a lot of speed work involved. So that's the other thing about each one. You think, well, all you're going to end up doing is standing here for an hour, and that's not the system. No. That's it's not the best style for a demonstration. I mean. You have those like kung fu dinners in Hong Kong, and like like when the Tai Chi guys come on and the slow music comes on, I think it's probably a good time to go to the toilet or whatever. And then the Yiquan guy comes on, and everyone goes, well, "What's going on here? When's he going to start?" And he's been there for 10 minutes. It's the worst system for a demonstration from that perspective. But it's based on exercises. It's not based on form. It's based on a lot of single movement repetition as well.
Do partner drills?
No,
there's no
really.
partner drills.
Not partner drills per se. The other styles of each one do push hands. We don't do it in our system.
Right. I did some pre kind of homework before coming to and I was looking at YouTube and other things, and I was seeing different and exactly that. I saw some were doing the kind of push hands.
A lot do push hands, but
we don't do it. And
we've got very clear opinions and views on that. It's not all bad. And I'm always controversial, and I always, people don't like it when I talk about this kind of stuff. But I mean, just for clarification, some of the skills that you involve, and your original question about partner drills. So we do a lot of testing in the Zhan Zhuang with a partner active. So for example, if there was 2 of us, and you would be testing my structure, and I'd learn to store energy. And then release, and we do that in all of the different directions. And you're working through one particular contact point as well, because a lot of push hand is based on making contact, sticking, moving, changing, all that kind of stuff. So we do that aspect of the art, but we do it through the Zhan Zhuang, through a lot of active testing, pushing, pressing, trying to get a clear sort of view on how to use those directions and how to store energy and how.
You're getting that physical feedback.
Yeah, so it's really, really, really interactive. Really interactive. The problem with push hands, because push hands you can develop the same thing. and it's good from that point of view. But we believe that you also get a lot of bad habits from it, because you then get used to chasing hands, and you then sort of start to go down one path.
Can do, yeah.
And that's when people start to, well, you can start to do arm locks in here and all that. You can do anything when you have an opponent's arms touching your arms. But in a free state of play, when people retract arms and they don't leave them out there, it's a very, very, very different situation. It's one of those things that Master Han was quite clear and said, we don't push, we hit. And but the other styles do it. I understand why they do it. If you take it for what it is and don't do, it's almost like, a lot of the Wing Chun people, Chi Sao's got a very specific purpose within Wing Chun. You're developing your Fok Sao, your Tan Sao, your Bong Sao actively, but that's not free fighting.
It's not.
A lot of Wing Chun people get really preoccupied in Chi Sao. Not all of them, of course, but some do to think that's how a fight will go down. So they're always looking for that contact point rather than just hitting and going straight through. So that's the problem from a mind boxing perspective. When you have occupying space as the main concept, no opponent as the main concept, if you practice and exercise endlessly pushing hands with another person, it's kind of defying the aspects of the art.
Yeah, I think that's just that kind of element should be seen as just that, an element of the training, not the main part. It's not fighting. It's an exercise. So it should be seen in those lines. I mean, our system is described as, in Jiao guys, described as a bridging system. So there's that, you're going for that content, but that's part of it. But people misunderstand it. It doesn't mean that we have to make the bridge. It's that if
only if that happens.
If the bridge is there, then we're gonna make contact and overcome it.
But it's preferable just to hit the person anyway, right? Before making the bridge.
If there's no bridge there, you can, or even if there is a bridge, we want to crush through it and smash them.
Bridge to your advantage, and I think that's a big misconception in Chinese martial arts. Altogether, that people get preoccupied with that bridge or that sap. They call it sap, right? Because it's like the letter 10 in Chinese. Or the character 10. Okay, if it happens, you've got it and you can use it to your advantage, and you stick, move, redirect, absorb energy, project energy back, all that kind of stuff. But the actual preference is and this is what most of the time is going to happen. You're going to go into free space and you're just going to bang and you're going to hit, and you're not.
It was described to me as that the highest level is if you're facing them, is to walk behind them, punch them in the back of the head. You know what I mean? Because that gives you the greatest advantage if they can't see you.
Well, actually, we do that in some of the footwork, and each one we because we're off on angles, you actually start entering behind the opponent. Really, and that's also boxing. Pivot, move, step, turn, and you get behind and take a different angle as well. So it's absolutely no different from that perspective as well. And the other question you have to ask is it's slightly different because it's sport, but you have to look at the context of real contact martial arts as well. And when you look at MMA fighting, boxing, bare knuckle boxing, how many times do you see contact points? Because when people retract their arms, it very rarely happens. You know what I mean? You'll get a clinch, and it can happen there. So you see it in Muay Thai, and then they'll move around and bring the knee and stuff like that. So there's opportunity to do it in that kind of. But most of the time, striking is clean.
Even in that clinching, a lot of the subtleness, the subtlety goes out the window, because there's people are clamping on, moving and dragging around. So if you're going to get that skill, it has to be quite high level to kind of.
It does, and you have to train it and practice it and be able to do it in a realistic. So if you can, but the guys who do those systems, they don't know how to use that. So if they, so it's an additional skill that we have if we're in the environment where we can do it. But otherwise, we're just looking to obliterate the opponent, basically.
So what does Yi Quan have in terms of I don't know if this is a term that would work, but like sansao or hand or foot techniques? Do you have key techniques that you practice? Like, punch, kick, like?
Yeah, so the Sabu Tansao is a collection just for the hand system. But generally speaking, everything comes from this. Okay, so that would be the first punch, or I just turn my waist to that would be a punch here. And then of course we have like a Jun, which is in Xingyi, an uppercut type punch, a straight punch of Bong Chuan. There's quite a few open palm techniques. Conceptually, we don't really think too much in terms of techniques. What we think about is, I'm talking about the 6 directions, is the force, backwards, forwards force, or sideward force, like a left and right. So that's where the Zhan Zhuang comes into play. So for example, there's one of the Zhongs where we stand, you can't really see the angle of my camera, with the arms out to the side. So that both my arms are stretched out, not locked. And then I imagine that I'm pushing forward against an immovable force and then pushing back on an immovable force. Now that Zhong is specifically to develop sideward power, going left and right. So you might think, well, hold on, if you're pushing forward and pushing back, why? Because it's to be combined with the footwork. When the footwork comes into play, you then have sideward power. So this can be a slap, it can be a crossing punch, it can be whatever you want. It can be an elbow, because we don't think really in terms of techniques. We think in terms of lines of power and directions of force.
Interesting.
So, so the Zhan Zhuang really comes into the system in that as well.
Right.
So there's kind of no techniques, but then there's thousands of techniques that can come with it. And there's, you know, as my Sifu says, and each one you can hit with anything, because direction. So you can hit with your shoulder, you can hit with your elbow, you can hit with your head. Xing Yi does a lot of that as well.
That really, it's very similar to what Alex and I we were speaking to Sifu Cheng, and he was saying, you know, if you generate that heavy power, that heaviness, if you generate that force, whether you want to call it shock power or gang or soft power, whatever, he said, anything I use becomes a technique.
Becomes a weapon.
Whatever, and that's from head to toe. Whatever I use, it becomes a technique, and that kind of seems. I'm trying to find a similarity, but that's
no, it sounds similar. I mean, and also is Kung Fu. It's about developing the body as a weapon, so you can hit with anything, whether it's your thumb,
exactly,
your hip,
and that's
you're
everything.
training your body to get whole body power.
Exactly.
So when you have whole body power, then you can express it. And when your body is open and your joints are aligned, like I talked before, and you can use your skeleton and your bones, then that power can come through. And it doesn't matter where it is. So we don't clench our fist when we hit. We keep it relaxed.
Right.
Hit there, so the power will be transmitted. So I can hit with my knuckle, and my hand is very, very relaxed. And that's so we can. It's part of the training at Zhan Zhuang as well, so we can repeatedly hit as well. So we don't need to reload power. So rather than a lot of people then pull back and reload, we can just hit because you have this relaxed, and it gives you a lot of speed as well. And this is, I talked about the speed aspect, which surprises people in each one, because you think, well, it doesn't look very fast when you're standing there. Speed is in the brain. It's not just limb speed, and it's how you get that CNS to develop that. So the obvious one is if you touch something hot and you pull your hand away, everybody can produce that kind of speed. You can't show me anybody who thinks they're physically unfit, they're uncoordinated. If you get them to put their hand in an oven, they'll pull it back at lightning fast speed. So the brain signal can produce speed. So when you see physically gifted athletes and those who aren't producing different kinds of speed, it's because of brain signals. So if you learn how to train that properly through Zhan Zhuang, through other exercises, you can then develop a kind of speed. So I can see, my Sifus who I mentioned are in their 60s can move like lightning. They're like ghosts when they move. But hold on, that from a Western point of view, that doesn't make sense, because you should be hitting your peak when you're 30. You should be young athletes that are able to have that kind of physical. It's because they know how to link their mind and their body together to reach that kind of level where they can do that type of stuff. And that's another great thing that I love about each one and all Kung Fu, is we can continue to progress as we got older, because we've got those role models and we've seen what they can do. And that's why I keep training now, and why I don't do Muay Thai anymore. I still box, but I because I know I've got a path. And you talk about, Alex, this continuous mountain, because in other things, that mountain stops when you get to about 30, and then it goes like that, and then you start to degrade and your physical condition goes down with what you do. And that's other sporting activities, be it whether it's football, whether it's boxing, whether it's tennis or whatever. You reach a certain age and the body will go down. But with Kung Fu, it seems like we've found a way to develop a system where you're linking the mind with the body, with biomechanics, with energy, where you can continue to improve.
The improvement is of a certain kind. It's not like that cardio or the real strength stuff that you have
Yeah.
when you're younger. But there's certainly stuff that will develop as you get older. It's like a fine wine, it just improves with age.
And that's from having that foundation, and it's gone back to that foundation, which builds the body and it bulletproofs the body, and it provides the power that will see you through years and years and years, rather than a short-term fix of just developing your muscles and it's the structure in the body.
And I think your health, if you're inquiring and searching all the time as well, improves your mind. It's your mind, your body, and when you feel good, and I think your spirit, that how you feel improves as well.
Definitely, your general well-being and everything, and then that's why you've got to enjoy your practice, because when you enjoy it, you're happy. When you're happy, you're healthy. When you're not happy, you're not healthy. It's that mind-body correlation as well. If you're under a lot, people who are under a lot of stress have a lot of problems in their life, will get physical issues as well. And there's no answer to that. I'm not saying that practice Yi Quan and all your problems will go away.
It will, won't it?
With all of your stress. Of course it will. Yeah, just sign here and pay this money to my bank account. I promise it will.
I want to go back just a little bit in terms of your Sifu in Hong Kong.
So, yeah, 2 Sifus in Hong Kong. Yeah.
Your first one when you went to Hong Kong. Sifu Chan. So what was your first kind of lesson? What was your first going to? What was that like?
That was an interesting story, actually.
Yeah.
So that was in the Qingwu Association in Qingmou.
Right.
And I had found the contact details for that. I got a friend of somebody, because they had the menu of the different lessons that were on. So I went in there, and there was someone who didn't speak any English. I didn't speak any Cantonese at that time, or very, very little. And someone just put a menu in my hand. And it was the days of the week in Chinese, and then it was whatever style it was. So I had no idea. It could have said sweet and sour pork on it. I had no idea what it was. So I had to take it into work and then ask one of my colleagues, like, is there anything on here that says anything like Yi Quan or Xingyi or anything like that? And he was like, well, that's Wing Chun. And that's yeah, it's on a Thursday night. Yeah. And I was like, what time is it? Okay, it's 7 o'clock. All right. So I went back with the menu in my hand. Yeah. And that was the first week I was in Hong Kong.
Wow. Yeah.
So so that class has got an interesting background. So the original senior student of Master Han, of my grand teacher, was called Ip Hei Sing, and he was still alive, but he was sick at that time. He had very bad stomach cancer. He was no longer teaching. Unfortunately, I never got to meet him, and he passed away a few months afterwards. But I heard he was very, very high level. So Chan Tat Chun was his younger brother. So he had just started to teach the class, because Master Ip was obviously on his kind of final days and too sick to teach. There was another student teaching the class. There was 2, and he was a senior student of Master Ip. So technically, by Chinese level, the younger student of Master Han should have been fully teaching the class, but there was a little bit of a, let's just say, politics in the class, and certain connections that other teacher had, and his private life and what he did and all that kind of stuff. So the class was quite loaded. It was a loaded atmosphere when I went in there. It was not a friendly place, and there was a clear division within the class of 2 teachers who were teaching the class at the same time.
Wow.
Who didn't like each other and who had very different backgrounds. And one had a more criminal background, and the other was a more virtuous man of integrity.
Hong Kong film, isn't it?
Yeah. But this was not a big class. It's like 15, 20 people. Right. So, and this told you what the environment was in there. So it was very crammed. It was loaded. So my first class in there, we just started. I just had to follow. Nobody really spoke any English or anything like that. And obviously we started doing the Zhan Zhuang. The other teacher got to me first, and he didn't speak any English, and he started to correct and move my postures and hand around, and sort of got in there, and he sort of stepped back and looked at me. And next thing I knew, bang, he just laid and punched me straight in the face.
Really?
So through my guard, my hand went back. I wasn't expecting. My hand went back into my face. I had claret coming down, so my nose just started to bleed straight away, and I was like, "What the
What the fuck?
Yeah, exactly. Where did that come from? What was that? And then I'm like that, and he's like, you need to do it strong. I'm like, well, I realize that now. Yeah. I kind of would have been nice if I knew you were going to do that, but beforehand. So I didn't really get a close connection with him straight away. I didn't sort of feel like this I didn't really feel. Sifu Chan had sort of watched this from a distance, and I think he felt a bit sorry for me. So he came across and he spoke a little bit of English, not much, but a little bit, and then said you need to move your elbow down, you need to relax your shoulder here, you need to feel like you're squeezing here, and curve your joints and sit like in a high bar stool, and your back straight and tuck your chin and all that kind of stuff. And I kind of figured they probably thought that this guy's not going to come back.
Yeah.
Anyway, and I did think about it, to be fair.
Knife attack.
But I do like a challenge.
Yeah.
And I do, and I thought I'm not going to let that put me off. But I did, so I went back and I didn't get hit again. And I had both teachers teaching me and correcting me and saying slightly different things.
Yeah.
This went on for probably about the first month or two, and then it kind of spilled over. And one night it was kind of, right, this group's leaving, this group's staying here. Which group do you want to go with? Do you want to go with this teacher who's they're going to go and train in another place, or do you want to stay here in Qingwu with Sifu Chan? So it wasn't really an option for me. There was no decision to make.
Yeah.
One teacher had been quite nice to me, and the other had hit me in the face. Although I don't think he meant it really nastily. He didn't do it again. I think he was just
went like a little bit further than you probably intended.
Yeah, he probably thought I had a stronger. He probably thought, my Zhan Zhuang might have been better and stronger and been able to have at least stopped it. So whatever, it didn't matter. But it was no question for me. So I ended up staying with Sifu Chan. And then, and it's funny because we laugh about it now, and we talk because he speaks quite a lot of English now. And I always say your English developed a lot faster than my Kung Fu. So he was learning. So I was like giving him a private English lesson every time that he was giving me a Kung Fu lesson as well. And then after about 6 months, he said, look, he had a full-time job. He's retired a couple of years ago, but he had a full-time job, so Kung Fu wasn't his living then. He said, look, I teach a couple of people at my house at the weekend. You're more than welcome to come along on a Saturday morning and train.
That's the ticket.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the ticket. And there was like 2 people training with him from that class, long-term students.
They go from 20 to 2 or 3.
Yeah. So I started training, and then we had another conversation, and he said, look, where do you work? And I was like, well, I work in Causeway Bay. And he was like, well, I work in Wanchai, and if you want to do something during the week, one night after work. So then we started training another night during the week, and that was just him and I as well. Relationship really developed, and in the true Chinese sense, he really became like a father to me. He really took me under the wing, and had me at his kid's wedding. He came to I had a small wedding, and he was a guest there as well for that. We spent Christmas Day together, so he was quite curious to know what a Western did on Christmas. So we cooked Christmas dinner in my apartment and brought him, and Seymour came across as well.
Beating KFC.
Exactly, and so it was kind of a funny relationship because he was. I don't get the impression he'd spent a lot of time with Western people beforehand, but he was very curious and very open. He's a very polite, quite a reserved man. It was really good, to the point that, as I said, he was going to come across. He's never been to the UK, so he did some seminars a couple of years ago in Russia and also Australia. I was going to bring him across this year, but of course we had to can that with everything. Hopefully it will happen next year. The other thing with him is that the other thing I found out is about a year into training, because I was training other things and I was learning some Bagua. And he said to me, show me your Bagua. So this is about a year over at his house, and he was kind of like, what's really
what are you doing?
Yeah, basically, why are you doing that? And he said, well, you also know that I do Bagua. I said, I didn't know you do Bagua. And he said, yeah, I've been doing Bagua for about 15 years. After Master Han died, I found a teacher in Beijing. and I do this really unusual style of bagua called Magway style. And so he taught me that as well for quite a few years. Luckily for me, and this is again, sometimes as a Westerner, you can end up in these positions because I think he felt sorry for me because my kung fu was so shit. And he just thought, so he'd never taught anyone the bagua before. So I became the first person to learn the bagua, probably out of pity than anything else.
He's like, this kid needs extra stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Well, then he got hit in the face, and then he learned really bad stuff, and then it's like, what am I going to do with him?
Yeah.
Paul Williams asks, are there any books on Han family Yiquan for those who are interested in learning more?
There's one. I have written a book.
Oh, you've written a book.
Yeah, I
nice
have
one,
written a book. Yeah.
Well done,
Thank you.
Paul.
Thank you for that question.
What's the info on that? We could put a link up.
I'd really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So it's newly published just in the last month. I wrote it last year.
Oh, cool.
And it'd been something I've been planning for a long period of time. So there was a book that was originally written a little bit about Han Yiquan, so called Tower of Yiquan, which was written by a Dutch guy, and that was back, I think, in the early 90s. Master Han traveled. So he's one of the few Chinese masters back in the day who did some overseas seminars like in the 1980s, 90s. So he went to the US, he went to Canada, he came briefly to London and stayed at Master Chu's Tai Chi school at Yang School. And anyway, he met a few people, and they wrote a book per se about Han Yiquan. So it's not the first book on Han Yiquan, but that was a bit more pictures, and this book is more about some of the stuff we talked about tonight. So my story in Yiquan, the experiences that I went through, the training that I went through. I got some instructional stuff in there. So I obviously talk about the Zhan Zhuang and the work and the Sap Yu Tong Sao, but more about sharing stories and things about when I went up to Beijing and the experiences I had with the first generation of Yiquan masters up there as well. So it's published by Line of Intent, which is Cosmo.
Yeah.
So Alex is, hopefully he's watching actually. He is a good friend of mine. I did some Xingyi with before I went out to Hong Kong back in London, 2002, 2003.
Yeah.
Met Alex there, so we've been friends for 20 odd years.
Right.
And I've always enjoyed reading his own books as well. And he's a high level practitioner and teacher himself. So we've been in contact for many, many years. And he kept telling me, you should write about, you've got a lot to say, you should write about your stuff. So thanks for his support with that. Eventually I did. And that's, so you can buy that book through his Line of Intent page. Yeah. So I'll give you the link for it. Yeah.
The title?
It's called Yiquan, the Fighting Art of the Han Brothers.
Nice. Let's get some questions on some came through on the group. We'll go through.
Okay.
A question from Arthur. Were there any competitions or matches between Yiquan and Xingyi guys in the past?
Not
rivalry between them, do you think?
Not Yiquan and Xingyi. Actually, more like all Chinese martial arts. The closer you get, the more rivalry you'll get. There's more Yiquan between more rivalry between the other Yiquan schools than there is between Yiquan and Xingyi. Because from our hands, Yiquan we consider Xingyi so important in our system, and it's the mother art. So we're also Xingyi practitioners, and we have a lot of respect for Yiquan and its place in the art. I think the older carnation of Yiquan, I say developed in the newer time actually, in the sort of the 50s and 60s, is further removed from Xingyi. So they would have a different view from us. So you have a Hong Kong Yiquan Association, and that was formulated. Have you guys heard of Ian Fock, who has been one of the presidents of the Chinese Martial Arts Association and quite a well-known individual in Hong Kong? Well, he's also a Yiquan practitioner, and he learned himself from Master Han. So he's quite an affluent individual, and he formulated the association. He brought many of the Yiquan masters across to Hong Kong from China as well.
Right.
The Yao brothers and many others. So the guys in China, they do push hands competitions, and they do some sandbag competitions as well.
Oh, cool.
We don't do that within our system. With a sort of a different view. So they do. There hasn't, to my knowledge, been any well, actually, I tell a lie. So in Hong Kong, probably, God, must have been there a couple of years, so maybe 2006, 2007.
Was there a specific Zhan or posture that you found particularly difficult or more challenging during your early training?
Ooh, that's a good question. So yes, in my background, there wasn't one that was easy. So because I'd done quite a lot of physical training, not bodybuilding, but strength training, kettlebells, all that kind of stuff. I found any of the jongs when my arms and my shoulders would be coming up, it was harder to relax this whole area of the deltoid, the traps, the clavicle. So we have one Zhan Zhuang posture, which is up. The arms are wider apart, but I'm showing my camera kind of here. So the arms are at head height. You're still dropping your elbow and your shoulder down there, but you'll start to feel a lot more stress on here if you can't relax. So because when I first learned that, because I couldn't relax, because I had tighter muscles and to relax. It becomes harder. So that was very, very difficult for me at first. You always have this debate about, can you do physical condition exercises in Kung Fu, especially with internal styles? You can't do that. It'll stop your chi. It'll block your body and all that kind of stuff. And coming from a sports science background, I've always really wanted to show that's not the case. That if you can develop a connected body, just because you can develop some strength doesn't mean you develop tight muscles. Everything's about balance and different attributes, and developing flexibility and agility and all that kind of stuff. But nevertheless, when you've got slightly bigger shoulders and you've got them up in that position, it's going to burn more. So the lesson that I learned around that was that, and people say that the two things don't mix together. One thing I'd agree with is when you first start learning, if you are doing a lot of weight training types of exercises, kettlebell, even push-ups, even calisthenics, chin-ups, stuff like that, and you're trying to build that connection through the Zhan Zhuang, it can definitely slow the progress. So for the first 6 to 12 months, it's better to ease off on that stuff and just focus on the basic training and get that into the system first, rebuild your body, rewire it, and then go back to it afterwards. It was difficult because I was also competitively boxing when I was in Hong Kong. I was doing white collar boxing fights and training really hard for that. So a lot of the physical training that came from that, not necessarily lifting weights, but even doing lots of push-ups.
Sure. Boxing training,
bag work. It's taxing on the body, and it's because you need to have that strength endurance when you're in the ring, which is a bit different from the concept of Chinese martial arts. We're not trying to fight over a long period of time. We're trying to produce power into 2 or 3 hits. Kill the guy quickly. We're not trying to do 5 3-minute rounds. So that probably for a couple of years, I think it slowed my progress a little bit on what should have been faster if I hadn't have been doing that. But I really enjoyed doing that, and had a lot of fun at the same time as well. So that Zhong, which gave me some painful sessions when I couldn't get my shoulders relaxed, and
that's good kind of feedback from it as well.
Yeah, and also, well, we're talking about books, so I'm not trying to do plugs here, but the second book that I've written, which hopefully will be published before the end of the year, Alex Cosmo, if you to finish that off, would be Strength Conditioning for Internal Martial Artists. So I've written it.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Give us those links, and we will add it, or Nish will add it to this vid when it goes on, so people can source those.
Brilliant, because I think that is a big common myth, that people can't do physical training alongside Kung Fu at the same time. And I think I really believe that you can. You just have to have some thought on how you program it. And
what I do on it is that you do if you're doing weights or something like that, you do the weights and it tightens the muscle up. So then you need to do the softer stuff, and as if it's like getting the chi to flow through that again. And once it has, then you've got bigger muscle or whatever, and you've got that chi's flowing again. But because you train regularly and you do one, then you do the other.
I view it differently. I look at anything that requires hard work or hard effort. It's gonna make you physically stronger. Or we can talk about whether it's functional or whether it's this or whether it's that.
Yeah.
But anything requires you to, like, even picking up something heavy. You doing that? Look at these I've training with, whether it's Kung Fu or whether it's boxing MMA. Like some of these guys that are like hardcore laborers, whether they're scaffolders or bricklayers, or whatever, and that's what they've been doing for years. When I train with these guys, they don't realize how just naturally heavy and strong they are.
Dense tendon power that comes from doing that kind of thing.
In the day, you won't remember, Al, but we used to have a guy that was a bricklayer from like he left school and that's what he did from when he was like 16 up until when I met him in his phase, that's all he done, bricklaying, all of this stuff. My days, when that geezer grabbed you, or when you trained with him, or when you
that's power. He's training power like 12 hours a day.
Like that's all he did, and I was like, and that was a big thing for me because I was like, what? And his forearms, naturally, his hands were just heavy, thick thing, and he wasn't aware of it. He wasn't aware of it. Maybe it was, but
it was his natural body.
That was his natural body, just from years.
Had become. But, you raise an interesting point because remember, a lot of these styles of kung fu, they came out of villages. They were farmers. They were laborers. They were workers. So they did strength work.
So they did.
I don't think you guys do. You don't work on a farm.
I don't, but if I did.
So if you were like carrying cows around all day and stuff like that, then you'd have that kind of strength. So if we don't do that training now, we don't live in that environment of farming, of manual work and things like that, and we just do the kung fu, we're not going to be as strong as what they were. We have to do something else on the side, little and often,
and
build the habits into the body. It's really important. It's really important. And you've got to remember, all of us are trying to develop whole body power. So we can utilize the maximum amount of weight in our body into one strike. Now, I'm not saying we're all going to eat and we're going to eat cheeseburgers and be 300 pounds and then we can put more power in there. But there is a basic physics point there that if you're stronger and you've got more mass, force equals mass times acceleration, you're going to produce more power. I think that's
what do they hear?
The smaller they are, the further they fly.
Did you ask that question from Chris?
Did, yeah. I've got one more one. Just a brief one. It might be brief. Do you do conditioning in terms of like limb conditioning, body conditioning, or anything like that?
We don't, because it goes back to the whole concept of you're occupied with your own body's condition and where your limbs are, rather than doing anything about hitting. Right. But the condition of the body that comes through the Zhan Zhuang. So we talk about the storing and the releasing energy, and then we release, we're in a very relaxed state. So it's a bit like, when you hit something and you're relaxed, you get less impact that goes through your body. It's like the old story of, somebody falling off a balcony, but they're asleep and they hit the ground, they can survive because the body's relaxed. So rather than us trying to create tension and grab the muscles to hit and condition, bang, 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 which we would see that as, it's a level of kung fu, but it's an external martial art. But our level is to transmit power through. Right. So we don't feel that we need to condition with that. Are there weapons? That's the engine, the specific engine of the system.
Are there any weapons in Yi Quan?
Well, we use weapons to condition the body and to train. So specifically coming from Xingyi, within the hand system, we use the long pole or spear, because you might have heard before Xingyi, one theory of Xingyi is it comes from the spear. And it looks like it does when you see like a bong chuan and straight punch. It's like spear work, or the pi chuan and chopping, or hung and all that kind of stuff. So we use the individual movements with the long pole. So it's not a form, but individual movements with that. Specifically within the hand style, because I mentioned Han's father was already very well skilled in Xingyi Bagua and Chinese wrestling. So we have some exercises with a short stick that comes specifically from Chinese wrestling.
Oh, right, yeah.
They're sort of their conditioning exercise where you roll the stick and then you squat at the same time, and then you do this kind of rolling.
That's great stuff, yeah.
Yeah, so they're very, very unusual exercises. So we do them as well. And also within Han Senior's lineage, they'll do some of the 5 elements with the broadsword as well. So with a heavy broadsword just for power. So when they're practicing kind of the chopping and bong type movements and power training, all we do with the sword. Just again goes back to the resistance work. So what's the if someone says I don't want to do any resistance or strength training, but you're quite happy to pick up a heavy sword and swing it around, well,
exactly, yeah.
Doing resistance and strength training, it's just it's functional at the same time. So what if you want to train your quad and your hips, kettlebell swings is a pretty good way to do it.
Yeah.
Agree.
You practicing your forms and getting correct technique and alignment and stuff like that as well. But there's also modern methods that you can use to add into it that will be very complementary.
Yeah.
Where do you do seminars in the UK for those who are interested in trying the style out? Do you do any one-to-one teaching?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'm based up in the Northeast, but most of the people I'm teaching are in the Southeast. So I've got a student who's based down in Basingstoke, Neil, and he's got a group of students that he's teaching down there. So will generally go and visit them once every 2 months, and do full day training weekends, kind of seminars, but also training at the same time. So I'll just kind of call it group training. And then with that, I do private lessons. So I've got a couple of students that are based up here. I have a couple of overseas students that come over here once every few months and then generally do like an intense weekend with me. They'll stay locally, like in a hotel, and we'll train, 8-10 hours a day for a couple of days. And then like probably a lot of teachers have been doing more online Skype stuff during this period now. Yeah, which is interesting. Each one's not a bad system to teach online because, especially in the beginning, you're not moving around a lot, and you're getting people to do Zhan Zhuang, and you're talking about the theory. So it's actually quite, it's all. I mean, obviously, you always want to have hands-on teaching, and you can't do the testing element of it and stuff like that. But as a way to get people into the art, and then be able to give them that afterwards, it's not too bad for that. So that's been quite interesting.
Out of interest, from my own kind of personal information, you mentioned that one of the main teachers came from a background of Chinese wrestling. Elements of that in the Han style of Yi Quan at all, in terms of whether an application or whether a concept? I know you have.
So we have the short stick movements that came from it, and this would be specifically from Master Han. I don't believe that he taught a lot of it. Now I was lucky enough to get some very old black and white footage of him training and demonstrating, and he was demonstrating a lot of these wrestling techniques, and they were awesome, by the way. But he didn't teach a lot of it in the concept of his Yi Quan.
What?
One thing we do have is we have one Zhan Zhuang, which is called a dragon posture, which is kind of like, do this without moving my headphones off. You might have seen it. So the person's in like a long bow stance, and you've got outward force this way, and they're looking down. So that's like a shoulder throw. So the origin of that Zhan Zhuang is most definitely comes from wrestling.
Interesting.
But what you are developing is a strong twisting, spiraling power across the waist, and it's a very intense, difficult Zhan Zhuang. And you've got your shoulders along one line, and then you're pushing up here, you're pushing down there, you're turning your neck, and you're very, very low to the ground as well. It's an extremely intense, difficult Zhuang, but that's from wrestling, and that's not one of the 8. That's
oh right,
separate. Yeah, the 8 are come within the basic parallel stance of like
my lateral one.
But some of the teachers, they have variations and
I can see
styles of each one, and then you have a combat stance as well, Ji Zhong, which is you might have seen, which is like the shield and the spear like this. So it's a variation of here, but turn onto the side, and then you use from that angle.
So it ties in very well with the question here from Mark Roberts. He says, "Hi James, very interesting information. In Yi Quan, if you have a physical altercation, a fight, do you adopt a particular stance with your hands up, e.g. a Zhan Zhuang at the start, or something else? What do you do?"
That's a good question because, well, I try not to have too many physical altercations and fights these days, and I suppose it depends, it's a good question, but everything it depends, doesn't it? It depends on what happens. We can train for something, but then in real life, when whatever happens, I always say anybody can get sucker punched, and no matter how good your kung fu is, if you get sucker punched in a bar by a 21-year-old kid who's full of steroids who does MMA, you're probably going to go down anyway. But hypothetically speaking, though, so we've trained this position for hours and hours and hours on end. So this is our default. This is our go-to position. The condition that you get from each one is a very springy, fast energy. Although it's heavy and it's hard when you hit, when you move, it's very springy. It's very twitchy. So we'd have this. It's kind of like an active guard, and we're constantly moving at the same time. So I would hope And if anyone's listening, please don't come and try and test me out. But I would hope if you know that I would default back to this. The theory of the art, you would default back to this position, which is the same as boxing and many other martial arts. Hands up as a protection.
Exactly.
Our hands up in this position here. And then by a very, very small movement, I can defend and I can hit at the same time.
Yeah.
And part of the structure that we look to develop is this 45-degree angle of the elbows.
Yeah.
And what that gives you is a slope. So you have friction. So if there is something coming in here, you can get a slide. So if an opponent's arm's coming in here and I'm hitting here, generally what happens is we don't block. This hand will slide.
Yeah, it's not a clash. It's not
a clash. No, it's not a clash. And that's part of the theory of me. Exactly. Structures. If I trust in my structure and I trust in my training, that's the whole point, that I don't need to worry about where the opponent is and what the opponent's doing.
Yeah.
If my angles are correct, if my speed is high, I'm moving and I'm constantly hitting. I'm hit, move, hit, move, hit, move, hit, move, hit, move, and my arms up here. I might take one or two odd hits, but I'm not going square onto an opponent stepping in like this. I'm going to get kicked in the nuts and punched on the nose.
Exactly.
So what I am doing is moving here, and I'm hitting and I'm moving and I'm coming around in this position, and it's very agile and it's very quick and it's very fast, but it keeps my structure all the time. And it's this springiness energy that we've developed from the training system, from the process.
I have a question based on the boxing that you've done, and I know that you still train boxing and you've got a love for boxing. Any learning? Did you see more informing coming from your boxing to your Yi Quan, or the opposite way, or did you kind of marry them together in some way?
It's a good question. So, and there's another theory on each one, that the later each one that was developed in China, that many people have theorized and said that because they didn't have the Xingyi, they've added some boxing into it as well. But it's a matter of debate. But you're right, I do have a love for boxing, and I still spar in a boxing gym once a week, even though I'm in my late 40s, because it keeps me grounded. I enjoy it. Yeah. And I like the contact that comes from it and all that kind of stuff. So for me, what I try to do is to really separate the two arts. I don't mix them. I don't believe in blending and mixing arts full stop. I believe that arts have their own specific engines, and you can train things, but you should box them. You should train them separately. But then what happens is you get a permeation or a positive crossover or correlation. So from each one, a lot of the stuff that I'm doing will be developing the inside of my body, tendons, my fascia and stuff like that. So that in turn should make me a stronger boxer, pound for pound, when I'm in the ring and doing it. Because of the speed training aspects that I've got in each one of my footwork, although I'll be adopting different footwork within the ring of boxing, I'll still have an increase in speed from doing it. So I think there's a crossover effect. What boxing gives me back is leave your ego at the door. You can't have any ego in boxing. A lot of people in Chinese martial arts, because they're not used to getting hit and they think they're invincible and they think they've got something really, really special, they carry around a little bit of a chip on the shoulder. Not everybody, but just some it's a common thing that I've seen. And you know, and I think that comes when you practice an art, and if you've never had any contact at all and you don't know. So if you go into your typical boxing gym or BJJ gym or Muay Thai, you don't see ego. You see people going in the ring, you see people losing, you see people helping each other, you see, you know, when someone gets hurt, you see concern, but you don't see ego of, you can't challenge me, do you know how long I've been doing this kind of stuff. But unfortunately, we see that a little bit sometimes in Chinese martial arts, and not in all schools, definitely, but in some you do. So I think I like the groundedness that boxing gives you from that side, that, you know, you can't be a dick. And you know what, if I teach somebody and they become better than what I am, then I've been a very successful teacher. Then that's a good thing. It's not about trying to keep my level up here and I'm the Sifu and all that kind of thing. So I like the coaching mentality of boxing that is about trying to guide people and develop them and train them, which is I suppose a bit more of a modern concept. So I think, to answer your question, I think it goes both ways.
Thank you for taking the time to speak with us on your Sunday evening. Really appreciate it, and for sharing with the Southern Praying Mantis group. Thank you for taking the time to share with us your experience.
I learn about your style as well, so it's two ways. And there's obviously a lot of synergies there.
Yeah, definitely. So definitely interested in the books that you've written personally, and we'll share them with the group.
Link.
You're part of the group as well, so feel free to post anything.
Thank you.
please do. It'd be really interesting for the group. So again, thank you again. And look forward to when all this craziness kind of dies down, or whatever happens, that we do in fact meet for some sort of yum cha or
Brilliant, yeah.
or an exchange.
That'd be fantastic. Yeah, well, I'm down there regularly, so I'd love.
Where do you go? You're Basingstoke mainly, is it?
Mostly in Basingstoke, yeah. But I usually come through London. I'll stop in London. I've got because I live there. Well, I've got friends there. I normally will do a night in London as well, so I can definitely arrange for us to meet up
for the future.
That sounds great, yeah.
And we do plan to try to meet up with as many people that we've interviewed as stuff as possible, because just crazy times, we can't do it in person. But this has been fantastic for us. It's been fantastic for the group. And as Nish said, thank you very much for your
Thank
time.
you for having me. I mean, you guys have got a great talk going on here. A lot of sharing. I can see a brilliant attitude that you have towards your training, which we definitely share. Which is the most important thing. Yeah. And I've really enjoyed talking to you both. So thank you so much for having me as well.
Nice one, James.
All right, take care. All right, cheers. Yes.
Hey everyone, thank you for watching this episode of Voices of Kung Fu. This podcast is brought to you by the ICG-PMA, the International Chow Gar Praying Mantis Association. If you enjoyed this conversation, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others who value the deeper path of martial arts. You can also watch more episodes on YouTube or listen on other major podcast platforms. If you'd like to support the podcast and help us continue sharing these conversations, you can do so through buymeacoffee.com/Voices of Kung Fu. You'll find a link in the description below. Your support helps keep these stories, these teachings, and these lineages alive and accessible to the world. Until next time, train with patience, practice with humility, and keep the spirit of Kung Fu alive.